The most confusing thing in JavaScript is that function can be called, as we have seen before, and also functions can be used like a class to create objects. That's why they created class in the last version of JavaScript, so that people like us wouldn't get confused. Or not in my case, because I had to study all that stuff to get to know that function could build objects, and that if you forget to put new, it was another thing, okay? So maybe with class, you always use class and you're sure that you have to put new because it's a class. Okay, let's create a function. Let's call it build an object. But I want to put it in the console so you can see all the properties that a function has. Okay, I'm gonna call it like this, and then I'm gonna call build object. And you see that it's only the body. The most important thing to know about a function is the prototype property. Okay, and you see that is the constructor that is used when you call the function with the new keyword. The prototype means that whatever you put inside the prototype object is going to be inherited by all objects, even after you have created the object. That's the most difficult thing, because in Java or in PHP, if you instantiate an object with a class, then the only way after that you don't have the possibility to add new properties to that object if you don't modify the class. Okay, you're gonna see now that if we let's put some property in here. We have this different way to use property. Let's put var object name equals test, and let's initialize this object with some property. If we put this, for example, var my object equals new object, new build object, like this, it works and it's an object. If I put, we have seen that if I put the property like name, it's going to work, no problem. And we can console.log the object. And you see that we have the property. And we can also put a function to that object. Say get name okay, and we put a function, and I'm gonna take advantage of this one because I didn't put this example in the other function. We're going to return this dot name. Okay, now let's call this function, this method here, and let's see what we get with this call. We get the name, okay, because this refers to the object you created. What about returning object name? Okay, object name is not defined. Why? Because when you build this object, inside function you see only the properties that you set to that object. It's not like a function that you can call, for example, when you call the function alert and you put my object, and it's going to work. Okay, you see, when you call the constructor, it's going to alert that value. But after that, this like a property value that is not seen in the object. The only way that you have to make this property part of the object is to use this. So if you want a property inside your constructor, to be part of the object that you create, you use this, okay? So if you put here this dot object name, then now you can access this property, okay? Now, in this case, no. I'm going to explain why. I'm going to take the chance. So you don't see it here because I added this property directly to my created object. I didn't add it to the function. So when I created this object, now I can see this object name when I create this variable. But inside this method, I don't see it because this method belongs to the newly created object and not to the prototype of the function. If I put here prototype, the name of the function, then prototype, get name, return this name. Let's see here, reference, error C. I have built object prototype get name, returns this object name. Let's see what I'm missing here. Let me see what the error is. Error reference object name is not defined. Yes, this is defined.
This object name, other than this object name.
No, console.log, see.
Can you run now?
See.
Because it was
okay.
Without this.
Okay, because I changed, okay, now it's okay. So you can see that now we have the possibility to see this variable because it's part of the object. If you put with var, that property is not a property that is going to be part of the object that you're going to create later on with a function, okay? This var is going to be a property variable that you can use for anything else. And also, you can see that if I put this function here directly to the created object here like this, okay? Okay, we have here, and remember that if I create, okay, we have this now, let's create a new object. Now, let's call it object 2. Now, if I call my object 2 dot get name, we have an error. Why? Because this object doesn't have access to this get name. This get name belongs only to this object.
We must put prototype.
In prototype. So if you want only your object to have that method, you put it in your object. And that this method is going to have access to all the properties inherited from the function. Okay? But if you want to put it, okay, I already created this object. Let's add, you see that we have this method name here. If we put it afterwards to the prototype of the function, even though we added the method after creating the object, you see that we created the object at line 8, we can call it later on because you know what JavaScript does? JavaScript does this. Do I have a property called name in my object? In my own property? No. Let me see if there is in the prototype. And then it goes up and it finds that in the prototype here, and then it calls that function. Okay, now we have this function in the prototype. Let's do some other thing. Let's put here my object dot get name equals function. And let's return idran. So after I have explained what I explained before, what would be the output in where was the call? In line 18, get name. Would it call?
I think maybe override test.
So I put getName in line 9. Then I added to the prototype of the function getName, the same name, in line 14. So you might think that we overrode this getName.
No, I think it will first look in the object and prototype.
Okay, first on the object. Okay, Idran. Every time you access a property of an object, JavaScript is going to look first in the object to see if it has its own property called getName. If it doesn't find that object, that property in the object, it's going up. Now if I put getName 2, of course, is not found in the same object and it's going to take it from the prototype. And then I get test. Okay? So one thing to learn here is that if you inherit from many functions, okay, to the prototype, you have to be careful because JavaScript traverses the tree of the prototype and it goes till object to see if it has that property. So if there is a very big tree of objects dependency, this object inherits from this object, and you call getName here, and getName is defined here, JavaScript is going to go all the way up till the end. So that's why you have to take into account if you're building a library and it's not gonna be slow, try not putting a lot of properties in the main object. If you need something specific to that object, then you add that specific function just to that object and not to the prototype. Okay? Because it's faster in that way. And remember, the second thing is if we cycle this myObject. Okay? If I cycle this myObject, I'm going to have this property name and I'm going to have also object name. And remember that we saw that if we verify if this object has own property object name, it would be false because this object name belongs to the main function and not to the object itself. So these are the most important thing about building object with a function. So we have the function. No, we still have a new another concept is passing argument to the constructor to initialize the object, like in Java and JavaScript. So let's put two property here. That is, we want to call, for example, first name and last name. And so we are going to put this property into the object. So like this, like in Java. But not exactly like in Java, because if you use a different name here, you can put in Java first name equals that variable and it's going to work. In JavaScript, no, you have to always to use this to refer to the future object that you're going to create. So in this case, you can build the object passing two arguments. And now let's create also two functions here, two getters. So this dot get name, and we can put a function. We can also create a function in the constructor while we build the function, or we can do it later on, adding that function to the prototype. Okay, you can do both ways. So in this case, if I said return this dot first name, okay. Now I can call in my object here, let's say my object 2.
But you name it differently. The first name where?
Okay, it's lowercase, okay. What would I have? I would have had as a result? Undefined, okay. That's one of the biggest problems because you don't see any error, but you don't see any output, okay? So let's call here in, let's build also object 2 with other names. Nardi, Zaira. Okay, and let's run it. I have one either here, I don't know which one is that. So my object, okay, from my object, because I built it with either. Let's console now the second object. it would be Nardi, okay? Say Idran and Nardi. And you can see that I can call get name in that way because I created here. Even if I comment this get name here, it would work because it's going to get it from the function. So imagine that this function, when you call it with new, it's like a class in Java. So you can define methods and properties inside here, and they would be inherited for every object. Or you can take this function here and put it later on. Okay? Put it in the prototype. That is the name of the function. Then prototype. Okay? That's the way that you can do it. Of course, you have to put it before calling here because it's a function. It's a new property. You have to call it here and here. Where is the function? What did I do wrong? I still have a get name here. Okay? So you have to decide if you're building the whole class, you know beforehand all the methods, you put it in there. And another thing is that maybe you have an object, a library that is not yours. You don't want to touch the core of the library. So how can you enhance that library? You use the prototype. Okay? If you have, for example, the date function in JavaScript, I don't advise you to write to the prototype of the date function, but you can do it. Let's say that the date doesn't have a method that you like to use. You put date.prototype. Your function, and you can have access to this inside your method. Or if you have, for example, Ext, that is the library from SJS, and you want to put something inside without touching the core, you use the prototype. In fact, most of the frameworks will do that. They import the main framework, okay, and then you write your code to the prototype of that main object, and then you can use those. You can inherit all the things from the main function or main class and add your own methods and properties in the derived framework. So this is the useful thing, because you could ask, why not building all the functions inside at the beginning? Because maybe you don't want to touch the core of the library. You can add the function, you want to add the function outside the core of the library in another file or whatever. Okay, so this is very important. The second thing, the last thing that I want to show you is that even that you can call also, and this is a beautiful thing, but let's see the time. We didn't record, no. Oh yeah.